color you're wearing. This is my sanctuary. Turn around!
He lives there!
The digital clock on the Mount Zion AME church marquee displayed 6:47 p.m. as Reverend Dr. Marcus Thornton wiped sweat from his brow with his sleeve, the embroidered clergy collar suddenly feeling tight against his neck. The side door, original to the 1871 post-Reconstruction structure, had jammed again despite multiple repairs throughout the summer, and the youth service would begin in 13 minutes. Marcus pulled the labeled church keys from his pocket, the metal warm from the 108-degree temperature that had baked Albuquerque since noon, and attempted to jiggle the deadbolt mechanism that had betrayed him 3 times that month. The 23 members of the Young Saints Youth Ministry stood assembled across MLK Boulevard, their voices carrying snippets of laughter and conversation that usually filled Marcus with pride, but tonight he felt only mounting anxiety about the stubborn lock. Nicole Gonzalez had moved into the newly renovated loft complex next to the church just 6 weeks prior, and she watched the man in black clothing wrestle with the door through her kitchen window. Her hand trembled slightly as she dialed 911, explaining to the dispatcher that someone was attempting to break into the historic landmark building that she had been told was a city treasure. The operator's voice remained neutral as she asked for a description, and Gonzalez reported a tall black male in dark clothing using keys but acting suspiciously around the doorframe. She did not mention the visible clergy collar or the labeled key ring because her angle from the second-story window obscured those details, and the neighborhood watch meeting had emphasized reporting anything unusual. Officer Kyle Branson received the call at 6:48 p.m. just as his shift was scheduled to end, and he accelerated his patrol car toward the church with the familiar adrenaline surge he remembered from his Army MP days. The address registered as a historic property in the dispatch system, but Branson had not bothered to familiarize himself with the local landmarks since joining Riverdale PD 8 months prior. His father, retired Sheriff Robert Branson, had taught him that property rights mattered less than establishing authority in uncertain situations. The officer's body camera activated automatically as he exited his vehicle, the red recording light steady and unobstructed. Marcus saw the police cruiser pull up behind the church van and felt a momentary relief, assuming the officer was responding to his earlier non-emergency call about the door malfunction. He turned to greet the uniformed man with his usual pastoral smile, extending his right hand while his left held the key ring with the large brass MT Zion Master tag clearly visible. Officer Branson did not return the handshake, instead placing his hand on his duty belt and demanding identification without explaining the nature of his presence. Marcus's relief evaporated as he registered the officer's squared shoulders and the way his eyes scanned the building rather than acknowledging the keys being offered. "This is my church, officer," Marcus stated calmly, holding up the keys and then his wallet containing his clergy ID card issued by the African Methodist Episcopal denomination. The temperature remained at 108 degrees, but Marcus felt a different kind of heat rising in the situation as Branson took the wallet without examining the ID card closely. The officer's radio crackled with dispatch confirming the trespassing in progress call as Branson finally glanced at the ID, his expression revealing no change in his assessment of the situation. Marcus pointed across the street where several youth had begun recording with their phones, their teenage instincts sensing something wrong with the way the officer stood too close to their pastor. Deaconess Dorothy Patterson's silver Cadillac pulled up at 6:52 p.m., her 89-year-old hands steady on the wheel as she arrived early to help prepare communion for the youth service. She saw the confrontation immediately and exited her vehicle with surprising speed. Her walker left folded in the backseat as she called out, "Pastor Marcus, is everything all right?" 3 other congregants arrived in quick succession, forming a small cluster on the sidewalk as they confirmed to Branson that this was indeed their pastor, and this was indeed his church. The officer's jaw tightened as he processed the new information, but his training had not included scenarios where multiple civilians contradicted his initial assessment. Branson's body camera captured the next 30 seconds clearly as he raised his voice, ordering Marcus to vacate the property until dispatch verifies ownership, despite the IDs and witnesses. Marcus's measured response emphasized his responsibility to the youth gathering across the street, his 15 years of ministry, and his role as property manager for the church's historic building committee. The officer's hand moved to his handcuffs as he repeated the order, this time adding that failure to comply would result in immediate arrest. Marcus stood his ground, his pastoral voice never rising but his words firm. This is my sanctuary and my responsibility. The confrontation reached its climax at 6:54 p.m. when Branson's body camera display showed a buffering symbol for exactly 47 seconds, according to later forensic analysis. During this gap, witnesses reported hearing Marcus state his credentials once more, while Branson allegedly made dismissive comments about paperwork not matching. The youth across the street captured the audio on 3 separate devices, though the visual was partially obscured by the church's magnolia tree. When the camera resumed recording, Branson was halfway through his final warning about the collar, his face flushed and his posture aggressive. The arrest itself took 12 seconds from the moment Branson grabbed Marcus's wrist to the clicking of the handcuffs. Marcus did not resist, but he also did not assist, forcing Branson to manipulate his arms into position while narrating "suspect is resisting" into his shoulder mic. The keys to the church fell to the concrete, the master tag clinking against the historic stone steps that had survived the civil rights era and countless other indignities. The youth members' voices rose in a collective gasp as their pastor, still wearing his collar, was escorted to the patrol car with his head held high. Let us know in the comments where you are watching from tonight, and be sure to subscribe so we can continue to cover more cases just like this. The police report filed at 7:34 p.m. described Marcus as uncooperative and threatening posture, and claimed he had refused to identify himself for over 20 minutes. The report made no mention of the clergy collar, the labeled keys, or the congregants who had vouched for his identity. It stated that the body camera malfunction was due to equipment overheating in extreme conditions, though forensic examination would later reveal no other devices in the area experienced similar failures. Officer Branson's father's name appeared nowhere in the initial paperwork, though the union representative who responded to the scene was his father's former deputy. Marcus remained silent during the ride to the precinct, his mind already drafting the motion to dismiss he would file if given the chance. He had sent hundreds of men and women to prison as a public defender who took plea deals they didn't deserve, and he refused to become one of them. The booking officer at Riverdale PD raised an eyebrow at the clergy collar but processed the charges as the system logged 2 felony charges that would later be challenged by a legal mind far more experienced than the arresting officer. The youth members across the street had captured 6 different angles of the arrest on their smartphones, and they immediately began uploading the footage to social media platforms with captions demanding justice. Deaconess. Dorothy Patterson stood frozen on the sidewalk, her 89-year-old frame trembling not from age, but from recognition of a pattern she thought she had outlived from her Selma marching days. She bent with difficulty to retrieve the fallen keys, her fingers closing around the master tag as she whispered a prayer for the grandson she had watched grow into a man of God. The patrol car pulled away from Mount Zion AME Church at 7:01 p.m., its red taillights disappearing down the historic district's main thoroughfare as 23 teenagers filmed its departure. The congregants formed a prayer circle on the very spot where Marcus had been handcuffed, their voices rising in hymns that had sustained their community through Reconstruction, Jim Crow, and countless other assaults. Sarah Thornton received the news while preparing dinner for their 2 teenagers, her phone slipping from her hands as she processed that her husband, a man who had spent his legal career keeping others out of prison, was now incarcerated himself. The police scanner in her home office crackled with Officer Branson's voice reporting 1 in custody, without mentioning the clergy collar still visible on his prisoner. The booking process at Riverdale Precinct took 47 minutes, during which Marcus's personal effects were cataloged and his clerical collar was removed and placed in a manila envelope labeled evidence. The booking sergeant, a 20-year veteran named David Ortiz, raised his eyebrows when he saw pastor listed under occupation, but processed the paperwork without comment, his neutral expression betraying nothing of his internal assessment. Marcus's fingerprints were scanned digitally and matched immediately to his clean record, the system noting his former status as a licensed attorney in good standing with the New Mexico Bar Association. The holding cell door closed with a mechanical clang that echoed in Marcus's ears, reminding him of the countless times he had visited clients in similar circumstances during his public defender years. Deaconess. Dorothy Patterson convened an emergency meeting in the church fellowship hall at 8:30 p.m., her walker abandoned as she stood at the pulpit with the master keys held high for the gathered congregation to see. 200 community members packed the pews, many still sweating from the persistent heat outside as she played the bystander videos on the projector screen that normally displayed hymn lyrics. The video showed Officer Branson's aggressive posture, the dismissal of congregants' testimony, and the precise moment the body camera malfunctioned, each frame contradicting the police narrative being released to media outlets. Sarah Thornton arrived at 9 p.m. with her children, their teenage faces pale with shock as they watched their father's arrest replay on a screen larger than any television in their home. Riverdale PD issued its first public statement at 9:47 p.m., precisely 1 hour after the arrest, announcing that an officer had detained a trespassing suspect at a historic church property and that the investigation was ongoing. The statement made no reference to Marcus's clerical status, the malfunctioning body camera, or the witness testimony captured in the viral videos that had already reached 100,000 views across various platforms. Officer Branson's supervisor, Lieutenant James Ward, approved the statement without reviewing the bystander footage, trusting his officer's written report that matched departmental protocol for trespassing complaints. The department's media relations officer declined to comment when asked specifically about the clergyman's credentials or the 47-second camera gap. Marcus sat in the concrete cell processing the mathematical probability that a body camera would fail at precisely the moment of escalation, his public defender mind cataloging the evidence that would demolish the prosecution's case. He had taught evidentiary law at Howard, and now he would practice it, representing himself in a system he understood from both sides of the bars that confined him. The temperature in the cell remained in the high 90s despite the building's air conditioning, and Marcus wondered if mentioning this in his motion would constitute describing ambiance or simply factual conditions. His fingers traced the cold concrete wall as he mentally drafted the opening argument that would expose the fiction of the police report sentence by sentence. At 11:15 p.m., the youth ministry's social media coordinator posted a compilation video showing Branson's Blue Lives Matter posts alongside his deleted account screenshots that members had recovered through cached archives. The compilation demonstrated the officer's pattern of aggressive responses to black motorists, including the previously unsubstantiated complaint that the department had dismissed as unfounded when filed 6 months prior. Marcus's Coffee with Cops program materials appeared in the video, showing photographs of him sharing donuts with Riverdale officers while discussing community policing initiatives that Branson had never attended. The post tagged the FBI Civil Rights Division and the New Mexico Attorney General's office, prompting automatic case number generation. Heather Rivera, the newly appointed prosecutor in the Riverdale district, reviewed the case file on Monday morning and immediately recognized the legal landmine she had inherited from her predecessor, who had retired abruptly last month. The charges of obstruction of justice and criminal trespass were supported only by Branson's report, which conflicted with the bystander videos and the 3 sworn affidavits from congregants that had been submitted to the court within 12 hours of the arrest. Rivera's supervisor, District Attorney Robert Chen, instructed her to pursue the case aggressively, citing the department's need for a win after 3 consecutive misconduct settlements had drained the city's litigation budget. The supervisor's directive came in an email that Rivera promptly forwarded to her private account, suspecting she might need evidence of prosecutorial pressure if the case imploded publicly. Marcus's legal notice of appearance and motion to dismiss hit the court clerk's desk at 9 a.m. Monday. Sehe, drafted on legal pad paper during his 17 hours in custody, before the judge ordered his release on own recognizance. The motion attached the bystander videos, the congregant affidavits, and a forensic analysis of the body cam malfunction that Marcus had composed from memory using technical specifications he had studied during a police technology seminar he taught last spring. It specifically requested preservation of all department communications regarding the incident, and notice of any attempts to scrub Officer Branson's social media history. The filing fee was waived due to his pro-SC status, and the case number appeared on the docket within 2 hours, attracting media attention immediately. Internal Affairs investigator Tanya Williams began her review of Officer Branson's conduct on Tuesday, interviewing the young officer who presented his father's sheriff's badge during their first meeting as if it constituted a character reference. Williams noted in her log that Branson appeared more concerned with protecting his personnel file than explaining the 47-second body cam gap, and he had already deleted his social media accounts before the department could issue a preservation order. The technician who examined the body camera reported finding no evidence of equipment failure, but discovered the device had been manually placed in diagnostic mode through a specific button sequence known to military police personnel. Williams's preliminary report recommended further investigation into potential evidence tampering, but her supervisor placed it on administrative hold pending the outcome of the criminal case. Marcus's teenage daughter created an online petition demanding charges be dropped and Officer Branson be investigated, collecting 50,000 signatures within 48 hours and attracting national civil rights organizations. The Coffee with Cops program that Marcus had founded 3 years earlier became a painful irony as graduates of the program posted testimonials about how the pastor had taught them to de-escalate conflicts with police, making his own arrest for peaceful non-compliance even more egregious. Alumni of Howard University Divinity School organized a clergy protest at the Albuquerque courthouse, with 300 pastors wearing their collars in solidarity and refusing to disperse when ordered by police. The department's response team backed down when faced with live streaming cameras and the unified front of clergy, avoiding a mass arrest that would have amplified the scandal. The 47-second gap in body camera footage became the focal point of every news broadcast, with forensic experts appearing on national television to demonstrate how the camera's buffer could not have been interrupted by heat or signal issues, as the department initially claimed. The manufacturer issued a statement confirming that such precise malfunctions required manual intervention and that their devices were tested to 140 degrees without performance degradation. Marcus's former colleagues at the Public Defender's Office filed a Bar Association complaint against the prosecutors for pursuing charges they deemed frivolous and racially motivated, citing the case law that would make any conviction impossible given the video evidence. The Riverdale City Attorney's Office began settlement calculations, projecting that defending the civil rights lawsuit Marcus would inevitably file would cost more than the 3 previous settlements combined. The preliminary hearing convened on August 28, 2023, exactly 15 days after the arrest, in a courtroom packed with 200 supporters wearing Mahat Zion Strong t-shirts provided by the church's youth ministry. Heather Rivera called Officer Branson as her first witness, and he testified confidently about responding to a trespassing call and encountering a hostile suspect who refused lawful orders to vacate private property. He described Marcus's posture as aggressive and threatening and claimed the body camera malfunction occurred when Marcus lunged at him, a statement contradicted by 3 videos showing Marcus standing still throughout the encounter. On cross-examination, Marcus asked whether Branson had visually inspected the clergy ID he had been offered, and the officer admitted he had not, stating he was trained to verify ownership through dispatch rather than accept potentially fraudulent documentation. The prosecution's digital evidence expert testified about the body camera malfunction, acknowledging under Marcus's questioning that the 47-second gap was statistically improbable and that diagnostic mode activation required specific technical knowledge. Marcus then called Deaconess Dorothy Patterson to the stand, and the 89-year-old woman moved slowly with her walker to the witness box, her presence commanding immediate respect from the bailiff, who offered his arm. She testified that she had known Marcus since his birth, had served on the search committee that hired him as pastor, and had personally witnessed him open that same side door with those same keys for over a decade of Sunday services. When Marcus asked her to describe the arrest, she looked directly at Officer Branson and stated, "I watched you drag our shepherd from his flock while he held the keys to his own sanctuary." Nicole Gonzalez testified for the prosecution that she had made the 911 call out of concern for the historic building, but admitted under cross-examination that she had not seen Marcus attempt to force entry, damage property, or behave violently. She confirmed she had been unaware of the church's evening service schedule and had not introduced herself to any neighbors since moving to the area 6 weeks prior. Marcus asked if she had seen his clergy collar, and Gonzalez admitted her angle from the window had not provided a clear view of his neck area, directly contradicting the police report's claim that Marcus had not identified himself as clergy. The witness's testimony effectively neutralized the prosecution's argument that Marcus had been trespassing, establishing reasonable doubt about criminal intent. The moment of legal climax arrived when Marcus requested permission to play the bystander video in its entirety, including the audio captured during the 47-second body camera malfunction. The video showed Branson's aggressive stance, the congregants' attempts to intervene, and captured the officer's voice stating, "I don't care what collar you're wearing. You don't tell me how to do my job," followed immediately by Marcus's calm response about sanctuary and responsibility. 300 people in the courtroom gasped as the video contradicted every material claim in Branson's report, and even the prosecutor appeared to study her shoes rather than meet the judge's eyes. Marcus rested his defense without calling another witness, the evidence having spoken more eloquently than any expert could. Judge Elena Martinez dismissed all charges with prejudice at 4:47 p.m., her gavel strike echoing through a courtroom where 200 supporters erupted in spontaneous applause that the bailiff allowed to continue for 17 seconds. The judge's written opinion eviscerated the prosecution's case, noting that when a pastor holding keys to his own church, surrounded by congregants who confirm his identity, can be arrested for trespassing, the law has been weaponized beyond recognition. She specifically cited the 47-second body camera malfunction as suspiciously timed and technically implausible, recommending referral to the state attorney general for potential evidence tampering charges. Officer Branson sat motionless in the gallery as his father, the retired sheriff, stormed from the courtroom without speaking to his son. Internal Affairs investigator Tanya Williams executed her termination recommendation the following morning, presenting Branson with documentation of 3 policy violations, including dishonesty in reporting, excessive use of force against a non-resistant subject, and improper evidence handling related to the body camera. The department's Civilian Review Board voted unanimously to uphold the termination, and the state decertified Branson from law enforcement, preventing him from seeking employment with any agency in New Mexico. Branson's father attempted to intervene through political connections, but the viral nature of the case made any favoritism politically toxic for the elected officials who received his calls. The former officer retained a defense attorney to fight his termination, but the video evidence made any reinstatement unlikely. The Riverdale Police Department announced sweeping policy changes on September 15, 2023, mandating that all calls involving religious institutions required immediate supervisor response and that clergy identification be presumptively accepted pending verification. The City Council approved a settlement of $2.3 million for Marcus, which he directed into a foundation supporting police reform initiatives and legal defense funds for other victims of racial profiling. His Coffee with Cops program expanded to national webinars training departments on implicit bias with mandatory attendance required for all Riverdale officers. Deaconess. Dorothy Patterson led the first session, her walker parked beside the podium, as she taught officers about the history of black churches as both spiritual and political sanctuaries. Marcus delivered his sermon, Sanctuary Betrayed and Restored, to a congregation of 800 on the first Sunday after the dismissal, the side door now, repaired with a new lock that required both key and code. He used his experience to illustrate how sacred spaces could be violated by those who misunderstood their purpose, and how communities must stand witness when authority is abused. Sarah Thornton stood beside him, their children serving communion to the youth who had first documented the injustice. The offering plate collected $47,000 in unsolicited donations, which Marcus announced would fund scholarships for students pursuing careers in civil rights law. Officer Kyle Branson moved to a rural county in another state 6 months after his termination, his father's connections securing him a position in private security that did not require law enforcement certification. The 47-second body camera malfunction remained under investigation by the state attorney general, who impaneled a grand jury to consider evidence tampering charges. Marcus's case became required study material in 5 police academies across the Southwest, teaching recruits how not to handle similar situations. Mount Zion AME Church's side door became a pilgrimage site for civil rights activists. Its 1871 stone frame bearing a plaque that read, "Sanctuary is not a place. It is a promise this community will defend."